Good Monday morning. Today I would like to talk about the importance of perseverance as a software developer. In this video I'm going to define what I'm talking about when I say perseverance, why perseverance is specifically important when you're a developer. I'm going to talk about how talent is a bit overvalued. And finally I'm going to talk about habits and processes because I think that those are a great way to improving your perseverance. Closing the window because it's making a lot of noise. Let's get into it. I am MPJ and you are watching Fun Function. What is perseverance? What I'm talking about in this video is stamina, sort of, like persistence. Maybe one way of putting it is the ability to withstand frustration. Kind of like how you can train your muscles to hold an object for an extended period of time. You can also train your mind to withstand frustrations for longer periods of time. And different people have very different tolerance levels for frustration. I think it's important to recognize that frustration is not an entirely negative feeling. Frustration is there to protect us, to make sure that we are not spending our limited energy and time on dumb things. If we as mammals, I guess, didn't feel frustration, we would just keep chasing animals that were too hard to catch and just expend more energy on catching these animals than we extracted from eating them. It's kind of nature's way of measuring return of investment. When you're feeling frustration, it's your brain's way of giving you a little bit of an indication that, is this really worth it? And the more time you're spending on this thing that you're trying to achieve, the more insistent your brain is going to be. Now you've spent a lot of time doing this. I'm gonna crank up your frustration a bit. So frustration is there to help, but it's like all emotions, and our brain has, the evolution of our brain has of course not kept up with the rapid change in society of industrialization and digitization, and our frustration thing in the brain is built or evolved for problems that we had thousands of years ago. And it's absolutely still useful, but it's a bit predisposed toward short-term benefits. And because of that, we need to build up our tolerance for frustration in order to have it, in order to compensate for it, so that it also works in modern society, especially when it comes to highly technical and problematic crafts like programming. This episode is part of a series. The idea for this series came from somebody asked me on Twitter what I thought was important things to learn as a new software developer. I could answer this personally because I have some ideas, but that answer would be very specific to me and my realities and my experience, and I feel like this question needs a much broader perspective. So I went to the Twitter and the Mastodon and I asked this. What do you think are critical traits in a programmer? Not to be super 10x or anything, just to feel good and function well professionally. And I gathered all the tweets that I got, about 100 of them, and I categorized them into 8 buckets. And those are going to be the basis for this series. The habits are 8. Perseverance. 7. Get shit done. 6. Teaching. 5. Understanding context. 4. Check your ego. 3. Empathy. 2. Being humble. And 1. Being curious. And this first one is about perseverance. It's important to recognize that this list is not like a checklist of things that you have to be. You have to remember that this is a data aggregate. It's like we asked 100 people, what do you think is most important? And a lot of people they said a lot of different things, and then we made a list that is ranked of what was at the top and what was at the second. There is not an actual person that thinks that you have to do all of these that we're gonna list in this video series, because that would be insane. Why is perseverance important to being a developer? A lot of the traits that we're gonna talk about in this series are very general traits, like that are useful as a human being and particularly useful as a person working in a professional and creative environment. So they are useful in general, but I still think that perseverance is particularly important to a developer, and it's also important in very specific ways. One thing that you deal with as a developer, to a bigger degree than most professions, I would argue, is being constantly faced with problems that you don't know how to solve. And as a result, you don't know how long they're gonna take. If you are able to do them, often not, you have to learn something new, or if they can be done at all. This is pretty particular to the role of a software engineer, to have this to such a large degree in their profession. I think a lot of professions have it, but I think that few professions have this on a fucking daily basis. You need this kind of weird naivete that when you are faced with a problem and you lean into it, eventually the problem will buckle. Even though you don't know what to do, you still take a deep breath, we start reading, we start thinking, we start drawing, and like slowly but surely we have this path that emerges. This often happens with bugs. It's you are tasked with a bug. There's a bug in your system. Sometimes you haven't seen the bug. You have just a user that has said that the bug exists, and you have to first find a way of reproducing it, and you just have no idea how to do it. You don't know what the user did, so you just have to get hints from the user. And then when you finally are able to reproduce the bug, you have to figure out what part of the system this is happening in, what might be causing this. You have to like brainstorm, oh, maybe it's this part, maybe it's this part, maybe this is happening. And then you have to start drilling down. With bugs, it's very rare that you can say, when somebody, okay, we have this bug, yeah, it's wrong. How long do you think it's gonna take to fix it? It's very, very rarely that you as a software developer can make a confident claim like, oh, it's gonna take this long. You have no idea because you don't know the intricacies of the thing, even if you're familiar with the code base. So it's one of those things where you just sit down and this task, it might take 10 minutes, or it might take 4 days, or it might not be solvable at all because some bullshit in another system. Or it might even be like that there's some bullshit in another system, so we need to either like replace that system or rewrite that system, and that would take like 2 years. And when you hit that situation, that's a situation when you should be listening to your frustration and give up and go away from that bug. But the point is that you need to have this mentality of leaning very firmly into a problem and not like having this, I'm gonna fix this problem. Because if you don't, you will have this horrible voice inside your head saying that you're a failure. Like if you think, I'm gonna fix this in an hour, I'm gonna push, and it takes like 4 hours. For every hour you pass past your imaginary deadline that you just made up, you're just gonna have this voice saying that you're a failure, you're a failure, you're a failure. Like, you need to have this lean in mentality and be very like slow and methodical about solving problems. Be consistent. Perseverance is also related to treating programming like a long game. This attitude is also very important, like not just to solve problems, but also to function long term as a programmer. Because programming is a marathon, not a sprint. This is true for both learning and for projects. In the learning context, I've had people ask me, like, I've So I've been doing this for months now. I've been programming for months and I've only learned a little bit. I often hear this from people going into boot camps, because some boot camps, they breed a bit of an unhealthy expectation about like you can become a programmer in the course of a few months. I mean, you can learn basic programming in that time, sure, but learning programming, it's kind of like when you finish your boot camp or you finish your education, that is when the real learning starts. It's learning programming is a lifelong lesson, and the more you learn, the more you realize. So you have your learning here, right? And this is what you know, and you think that, oh, then you see like this corpus around it with stuff that you don't know, and as you learn, as your learning grows more and more, you realize that you were wrong. This thing isn't this size, it's this size. So you learn more and more, and then you realize that this thing that you don't, this area of stuff that you don't know, it's almost infinite. So you realize that learning and programming, it cannot be completed, not even close. You just have to pick like a path inside of it and go slowly and just grow and compare yourself to the person that you were yesterday. That feeling of, oh my god, there is so much that I don't know, that feeling will not go away by learning more. It will grow to a point where it's just realize that, okay. And the marathon, not a sprint, also relates to software projects themselves. Like we do have these ship dates where we get a new version of the software out the door, but software today tends to not exist in a vacuum. It's not like a game that you release and then it's released, it's on some CD-ROMs and we never update it. Some software today, it lives and breathes. It works on top of other systems, on top of operating systems, on top of libraries, on top of internet connections and servers. They are living beings that constantly needs fixing and evolving. I've seen so many software projects fail because people treat them as projects instead of processes. So in the same way that you can't treat software development as a project, you need to treat it like a process, you also need to treat learning not as a tuition or like something that you stuff into your head, this curriculum. You need to treat it as a growth process. You need to cultivate this growth mindset. The number one skill in this list is learning, and we're gonna get to that later. But perseverance is one of the bases for the learning habit in general. Talent is greatly overvalued. I often find myself, not as much nowadays, but in recent years, like feeling that, I don't have enough talent for this. There are so many more people that just pull software development off so naturally. They are just smart, and I'm not particularly smart. At least I don't feel smart. At least not smart like them. And I think a lot of people think that this way, that I am not X, therefore I cannot do Y. And I think that it's natural that this attitude exists, because it puts the blame elsewhere. I am not good at math, therefore I cannot be an engineer. Then it's not my fault anymore. Engineering, that's for other people. I would like to, but I am not good at math. I am. But it turns out that science has proved this largely wrong. There is a fantastic book called Grit that is written by Angela Duckworth. You can check out her TED Talk here. Clicking there, I've also linked it in the episode description, along with a link to buy her book if you want to support me and the show. The book is about a lot of things, not just persistence, but this more all-encompassing concept called grit. But one very, very interesting thing that I gathered from the book was that they did studies on these kids, and they found that grit and persistence was way more indicative as a correlator than any other characteristic. Having talent for things, it definitely did help, but the absolutely biggest correlator for success was just going at it and working on it. Statistically, that is what matters. When I saw the study, I initially got a little bit suspicious that, oh, okay, but maybe the talented kids are just more persistent and gritty because they are talented. But they actually disproved that. They actually showed in this, they actually figured out that talent does not cause persistence. And they even found a slight negative correlator. So if you're talented, it might actually cause you to be a little bit less persistent, which is interesting, but it might be related to like the fact that you feel like since you have talent, you feel like that you are entitled to success, and when you hit a wall or your first wall, you are not capable to deal with that because you feel like it's due to your identity, who you are, I am, that you should succeed. Anyway, great book, Angela Duckworth, Grit. Finally, I would like to talk about processes and habits, because I don't think that persistent is some magical emotion that just arises in you. I think it's to a large degree habits and process. I did a Q&A with my friend David, and this is one of the questions that came up, but I want to talk a little bit more about it. It's very important to develop your professional habits and processes. For instance, when you encounter a problem that you don't know how to solve, like, oh, we're gonna do this thing with the database, we're gonna request this thing, and we maybe even don't know what database to use, or maybe we even don't clearly know what the problem is. When you're faced with a challenge where there's no clear path forward, you need to know what to do. Whenever I encounter a bug, I kind of have these motions that I run through, like these thought processes that I've developed over the years. I often try to, go into the code and find the issue, and sometimes that works, but mostly it doesn't. And I feel that familiar sense of frustration creeping in. And at that point, it's easy to just go hit the coffee machine, or usually the more common response that is kinda sort of okay is to just like unassign yourself from that bug and then start working on another bug. Somebody else can deal with that bug. But then I think that if I'm on a good day, I think that this is okay. This is you're used to this. It's always like this. Let's just breathe and start thinking about the problem like we usually do. In the case of a bug, I usually try to just list a lot of places where the bug might reside. I just brainstorm a little bit. And then I jump into these parts of the system and I start adding breakpoints or console logs, and I try to narrow down the field where I think that things might be going wrong. I add checks here that sees okay, the data is correct here, the data is correct here, the data is correct here. Okay, but what about at the end, the data is correct here, the data is still correct here, the data is correct here. Okay, this is the area where things are failing. Let's try to narrow that down until you find the bug. Sometimes the problem is just vague. Maybe you've got a vague project description from the organization. Maybe it just has kind of it's been like a game of telephone through the organization, and the assignment that you're given, it's just not really clear. It's just the path forward is not obvious. You don't know why you're doing it, and in that situation, you just need to take a step back, think about this problem. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And try to write that down and talk to the people involved. Is this what you want me to do? It's kind of different for every situation, but the important thing is that you develop these habits and these processes to protect you from frustration, so that you have something to cling on to once the frustration train hits you. In order to have perseverance, you also need to manage your mood and energy. In movies and to a degree in professional life, we tend to glorify these crunches a bit, you know. We just, okay, we need to get this out the door on Friday. We just drink coffee and eat pizza and stay and work all night until it's done. Bam, it's out the door. Shipped, let's have cake. And you can do that. That works. You can do that for quite a number of times before that starts wearing down on you. But eventually it will. You will break, and a morning will come when you suddenly just don't feel like getting out of bed. And then you force yourself to anyway, and you do that for a couple of weeks, and then you suddenly can't get out of bed. Development is a marathon, not a sprint. It's important that you have like this sustainable productivity. You need to be like, you can't be this person that has low productivity for a long time and then like a burst of productivity at the end of a project because of panic. You need to be this person that has a medium level of productivity all the time. Don't skip lunch, get a standing desk, don't sit around too much. Take a walk around lunchtime so that you get your energy levels up. Drink plenty of water, and if you're feeling down or sick, make sure that you deal with that and don't try to just push through it. Have a time when you get into the office every morning. Know what you are doing. Make sure that you know how to get started quickly. Don't start by checking email because you will be distracted. It's good if you have decided the day before what it is that you do, like at the start. Find a system that works for you, that makes you persevere for a long time. Oh, by the way, there is this book about solving complex problems that is called How to Solve It. It's great. I've linked it in the episode description. That's it. That's what I had to say about perseverance. It's the first episode in this series of 8 important habits for a software developer. You have just watched an episode of Fun Function. I release these every Monday morning, 0800 GMT. But if you don't want to wait that long, you can watch this episode that the machine learning cyborgs of Google's have determined is optimal for you. I am MPJ. Until next Monday morning, stay curious.